Hiya, it's Dan. So I'm an animator, artist, and drawer of things. So today I thought I'd just show you the process of how I do a portrait, specifically self-portrait. So here I have a mirror of all things. Now you're probably wondering why a mirror rather than just a photograph or something like that. The thing I like about having a mirror is just the fact that you can see all your dimensions and everything clearly in flesh, because I think with the camera sometimes, depending on what lens you use, especially if you use smartphones, there's always a bit of distortion with the face, like some features look bigger and shorter. And I think also the advantage of having a mirror, it kind of stops you from doing that sort of risk where you sort of just take a photo, pop it in the software that you're using or print it out and then just trace over it. Not that there's anything wrong with tracing, but I feel for what I want to do today, it wants to be quite a natural, accurate drawing of what I see here. Obviously, when I come to doing drawing portraits or people, I'm not really wanting it to look pretty or anything like that. I try and look at it from a very life drawing perspective where you sort of just want to get the shape, you want to get a sense of who the person is, like a bit of resemblance. You want the resemblance there, but it's not necessarily about doing a really pretty picture where everything's really neat and tidy and that's not quite like what I like. I like something to be a bit raw, where you've got the resemblance, but you can also see the discovery in the lines and that sort of stuff with my work. All right, so let's get to it. I've got my mirror set up just here. So I'm basically popping it as close in front of me as I can without blocking everyone. So what I like to do first when I'm sort of doing a drawing, be it of a building, a person, object, whatever it is, I sort of like to just have a moment where I sort of just look at it in detail without drawing and then just sort of following the lines and the shapes around in my head. So if I look at myself now in the mirror, basically I can see where my jawline starts, you can see with my ears. So what I like to do is sort of just trace around it in my mind so I can just get a feel of the shapes that we're sort of looking at, and also just helps me get a bit of a sense of dimension, so you can see where the jawline comes down, goes around, got my chin, and goes back up. And then from here I can sort of see where things line up. So we've got the top of my ears, but where my ears meet my sort of sideburns, that's where the sort of eyebrows meet. So I just like to have a moment just to properly have a little look. Might look a bit weird, but it helps me sort of process, just to get an idea of what I'm going to be drawing in my head. Because I always find with drawing, it's less about looking at what I'm doing on the page and trying to make the lines all pretty. And it's more about sort of just understanding the shapes and lines that I see in front of me and trying to capture them on the paper. But really I want to keep where I'm looking like 80% of the time at the image I'm drawing, and then like the rest of the time just making sure that I'm not, drawing on the other side of the table or something. Now I think with drawing, there's always like just an urge to sort of do the whole scratchy, coming back and forth, all that sort of sketchy stuff, going round, sketch. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think the only downside of that is sort of you get almost editing yourself before it's even gotten on the page, if that makes sense. Because I think you're less thinking about the shapes and you're more just being like, oh yeah, gotta get that line there, and it becomes a little too bogged down, I feel, in the line work. I think for this kind of portrait that I'm going to be doing, as I said, it's not going to be a pretty one. It's more just capturing sort of what I see and trying to get a feel for the subject, i.e. me. So what I kind of want to do, if I just look at myself now, so I'm just going to come for the jaw first. So we got like a little line there, coming around, got the chin. So you can see I'm sort of doing quite loose lines, because what I want to do is just get a feel for the shapes without sort of going back on myself. Yeah, we've got the hair coming around here. And as I said, the eyes. So you can see where the line sort of comes in here, where the brow meets the cheek. I couldn't think of the word then. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to have a line coming across, because we can see where the ear is. So I'm just going to quickly just sketch this out. As you can see, it's not going to be perfect. It's not pretty. That is a gigantic ear. But I'm just trying to get like just a loose feel for where everything is. It's not. This isn't going to be the final thing. It's just a case of seeing where everything comes into play. Now I'm not really looking at what I'm doing on the page. Now, when I sort of do drawing, I try to not just pick out the features, because I think sometimes, say for example, got an eye here, I think it's very easy to forget what you're looking at and be like, oh yeah, an eye, so we do this. You've got the pupil, the iris, It's very easy to draw the symbol of what you are sort of seeing rather than, literally drawing what you're seeing. So what I tend to do when I'm drawing is just trying to look for little marks, little signatures on the shape. So trying to think of it less of it being sort of, like an eye, an eyebrow, whatever. And I look more at where the light is falling, the shadows, these little shapes that I can see coming into play. So we've got a little one here where it's sort of got my dimples. And then here we got the chin. And what I sort of notice, I can see like a sort of trampoline shape that I can sort of see on the chin. Just want to get, just the basic shapes. Now, this is not looking pretty, but we're going to come back to it because this, for me, is just to find the sort of structure of what I'm drawing. So you can see I'm sort of just trying to get the lines coming round, just not thinking about too much, just mapping out basically the features on the face. And then what I'm going to do is sort of come back to it later and just fill in the details. And what I kind of like about this way of doing it is that, yeah, things do get a bit warped, they're a little bit over the place, but I think it brings a little bit of character to it, because what I'm drawing might be exaggerated unintentionally, because when I'm looking at the features here, I'm not necessarily looking at what's on the page, so it's already going to be a little bit warped. But I think in the process, you're sort of exaggerating and giving it almost a caricatural sort of feel to it. So I've got my eyebrow coming around here, sort of stops, and you have a lot of light where I am. There's quite a dark shadow coming around, so I want to sort of capture that. And here we have the cheek. Now you can just see the line of it. It goes whoop, sort of down there, a little bit of a line there, and then we've just got the rest of the face. So at the moment it's looking very impressionist, quite abstract, but you can sort of see how I'm starting to block things out. This is how I sort of work it with portraits, just getting a feel for where things are. Now if I look at myself, I can see the top of my nostrils, got a cheek there, which you can just see sort of like a little bit of line, got a cheek. And then we have an ear starting, sort of goes round, and it's cut off by the hair. Now the resemblance, I'm looking at it, it's not, it's not like a perfect super resemblance to me. And I think what's always interesting in doing self-portraits is that the way you sort of envision yourself ends up being very different to what you see on the page. And I kind of like doing self-portraits for the fact that I can make it kind of ugly, I can make it unpleasant, and I don't feel bad because, it's just me. But I feel like when I'm drawing someone else, there's always like a worry that if you're doing it for them, for example, there's a worry that you want it to look, aesthetically pleasing, so they're not going to get frustrated or anything. But I think I've started to come away from that now with it. Okay, that's not looking very pretty. It's quite a grotesque drawing, but it's basically given me a map out for when we go into like the bit more detail, tidying up a little bit. I'm quite liking how it looks. It looks a little bit like a bedraggled, tired, I don't know, lost rock stuff. I'm living that, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to drop down the transparency now. If you're doing this by hand, I suppose if you're using paper, just make sure it's like a very light brush, light pencil, like a 2H or anything like that. Although admittedly I'm not very keen on using H pencils for when you're just getting sketching out. But something we can figure out. So let's add ourselves a new layer. And with this one, I believe we've already got quite a dark pencil, so that shouldn't be too bad. So with this, because we've got things mapped out, this is when I can be, a little more detailed with it, come down to it, and I can look a little bit more on here than I can at myself because things are mapped out. But as I was saying, it's always a bit of a risk focusing on the drawing, because then you get too much trying to do symbols, being like, oh yes, we've got an eye now, so, oh yeah, there's eyelashes, there's that. There's a risk of drawing how in your mind sees it. Like, if someone told you to draw a chair, you're going to draw your own version, your own symbol of what you see as a chair. And I feel like the same with the face. Like, you see an ear, you're going to draw what you think is an ear, and not necessarily what you see in front of you. So I do want to detach myself from those elements and look at it just as the lines and the shadows that I see before me. I think I like to do is, when I first do the drawing, I've got the map out of the face shape, make sure that's right. But when I'm sort of doing the sketching, I like to sort of work in from out. It doesn't really matter too much because we've already got the shapes there, but some people like to start on the eyes, start on the nose, whatever. But I think I'm just going to start on the jawline and then do what I did earlier, where you start from the inside of the face and get out. So I'm going to get myself in place and position again, and we will get cracking on with it. Alright, so let's start with that jawline. So I can see that's where the hair comes here. Just going to come around, trying not to come back on my lines too much. I want there to be sort of a confident line with it. Up and around. So there's that the sort of trapezoid thing that I was telling about. So I can see that a bit more clearly now that I've got it mapped out. So there's a little shadow here on the chin. Got that there, and then got like the dimples coming through. So that sort of jawline now, I feel like that's quite in place. So let's have a look at the rest of it. So I can see I've got my hair coming there. Hair come round. Just gonna do a few lines just to get the shape there. Just to map it out a little bit more. And then we're sort of just going to come back to that in a moment. Because basically now I feel like I've got the main sort of outer lines of it. So from here on, even if like the eyes go all over the place, we've got the bare bones. I feel like the thing for me that really separates different characters, it's not necessarily like how big their nose is, how big their eyes are, blah, blah, blah. But I think what really gives a resemblance to someone is if you get their jawline, their face shape right. Because so many times I've done a portrait of myself or someone else, and even like the eyes look good, I'm like, no, that is their nose. Because the jawline might be more oval than it is in person, or more square. That really throws it off. I feel if you've got the jawline right, everything else, you can normally be a little bit more liberal with it, rather. So on the sketch, I sort of had the nose's bridge there, but looking at it now, I can see it does come up a little bit. So we have got that, and what I'm doing actually is following the shadow of it, because I find that's where my interesting part is. So there is like a line here from where the actual nose is, but I can see where the eye is. There is like a shadow here being cast by the nose itself. Got that map there so I can get a feel for it, and what I'm going to do is just a bit of hatching just to get that in. Now I know some people like to do hatching afterwards, but I kind of like to jump to and from doing the lines to the shadows. I don't know, it's just sort of the way it all tinkers up in there. So we've got the eye. Now I can see with my eye, my eyelids fold a little bit on this one. So even though I've got the markings here, I'm trying not to look too much at the page. Because although I can tidy it up and make it look prettier and a bit more how it should on here, I think it does risk taking some of the, uniqueness, the spontaneity out of it. Now this is a problem. So when I was doing the iris just then, you could see that I was just going straight in and drawing a circle, but obviously that is not what I'm seeing. So that's how we can fall into doing the whole symbol. I'm going to sort of come back to that eye actually, I think. So I'm just going to block that out for now. Let's get that rest of the nose done, and then I can sort of come back. So obviously, like, I'm always, you're going to make mistakes with it, which is fine. Just going to make it a little bit darker because I can see there is quite a heavy crease just around here. So just going to do a little bit of shadow work. Right, when I'm looking at the nose now, I can see there is got some marks coming around. And as I said, like, there's a shadow there, which is a little bit darker, but then we also have the bridge of the nose. Now I'm just going to cut that back a little bit. I feel on my initial drawing actually went into, so that's one of the reasons why even when we've already got it mapped out, it's good to sort of keep focusing on looking at the subject, because it stops you from, not to say you got made a mistake earlier on, but sometimes kind of you don't want to stick with what you've drawn. You still want to have a little bit, you're focusing on the subject, you're not focusing on the drawing. The drawing is secondary. Okay, so I can come down here. See, I've got a couple spots. Now, when I look at this, I can see more of a circle because I can see a little bit of light there. So I'm going to come back on that. Looking at the eye now, you can see I've got bags. Someone did not sleep well last night. So I'm just going to do a little bit of shadow. So sometimes where I don't want it harsh, like I don't want to have a harsh line because that looks a bit like, you know, Emperor Palpatine. So doing a little doing a little like line work, just like this, gives the essence of the line without it being so harsh. Because, you know, I think my work does have the strong lines, but I don't want it all to be blah, 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 super intense. You want to have the softness come through every now and again. And there is like a little bit of lightness just underneath the eyelids. So I'm going to catch that. And then here we go. A fold under the eye. And then you can see I'm already seeing where I had that mapped out earlier. That's where we got the shadows coming into play again. Just going to pop them in there. There was the little crease. So I'm just going to, as I did earlier, just put a couple lines, nothing too pretty. Interestingly, there is a shadow being cast on the whites of my eyes, which looks a little bit weird, but I kind of like that. And I do have that where the crease comes down, so I'm sort of getting that in. Right. What I find interesting about when I'm doing my own face is that when I'm drawing, I kind of go like, like I pull the expressions. So I've kind of got a mix of resting face, and then when I start drawing, the puzzled face, which I think is interesting because I can see that coming through in it. So we've got the eyebrows. So we did have that quite nicely mapped out, so I can just come in quite heavy with this. A little bit scatter. You know, I don't want to come too pretty with it. You can see when I sort of do the line work, I am just being quite loose with it. I kind of like that sketchiness. It feels like it's moving. You've got that liveliness. Got the shadow line coming in. And then we're just going to work a little bit on the nose because I do have redness around the nose, which is always nice. So we're just going to get that in. And then a little bit of a razor just to get that shape there because I think it's not quite that harsh. There we go. So let's get that other eye done. Same as before. So I can see there's a little pocket of light. So you can see I actually do like just to draw the light. I just like to do the shapes that I see in the light. So I've got a bit of light reflection here. And then the eye itself, coming around. So we can see where our markings were earlier. Relatively in the same place. This eye doesn't have much of a fold on it as the other one. So I'm just going to come around. Now there's a chance the eyes are going to be looking in two different directions because of how I'm doing this, but you know. Now already I can see I haven't come down hard enough on the brow. There we go. So that's once again looking at my face now rather than looking at where we mapped it out. And the same again, we're just going to do a little pitter-patter line. Just to sort of find the shadows but not over-define them. Okay, let's get that tash working. So I'm just going to follow the shape that I can see curves around. And there is a little bit of shadow there. Just going to tipple that along. And then I can obviously see, as I was saying, the dark shadow in the face. So I'm just going to go to town on that. It's just... So I think it's very easy, just sort of think of a mustache. What I said again, like with the symbols, like you could just be like, oh yeah, that's a mustache, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, it's hair, it grows very differently. There are always little shapes. So I can sort of see it's coming up, round, and I can see there's different lumps in thickness. So obviously it's not like I've got a square and a square, but that kind of helps me just to get an idea of where I'm going to do the shading and, you know, have that definition coming through. So let's get that tash in. Just following what I can see. I'm going to do a bit of hashing in the eye. And we've got like the odd hair coming out. I'm not going to be super precise with this, it's just to give the essence of it, because someone needs to trim their tash. There we go. So that box that I did earlier, that sort of gave me a chance to sort of come back a diagonal, just to sort of give the where this thickness is coming in and thickness is coming out. Now already looking at it, I can see the eyes aren't level. There is a wonkiness to it, but I'm going to keep it going because I do like that. Because as you can see when I'm drawing, the face is moving and I kind of like capturing it as I'm sort of going along. Not having the symmetry, I think it just makes it more interesting to look at. So now that I've looked where I've done my lips, I feel like the chin does need to come down a bit more, sort of here, just so that I can get a little bit more in. So once again, we've got our guide, but we're sort of going against it, you know? It's there, but it's just a guide, it's not all. So we've got the shadow, and then we've got the hair coming down there, and then hair here as well. And I can see got those lines in the face. Now the thing is, like, how do you separate the difference between the hair and the shadow? When I'm doing the shadow just around here, I've got it a little bit more loose. A little loose. You know? I think I might go really dark. So just by doing the block of shadow, you know, we don't need too many hairs in it. The hairs sort of just add to it, but the main definition is coming from that light. There is like a little darkness. I think it's nice just to have a little bit of shadow just so it doesn't feel too disconnected. And obviously we have the little definition of the jawline and the cheeks coming around here. Now that is looking like hair, so that's what I'm talking about with the difference in direction. Looking a little bit like Tiger King, but you know, it's all good. Guess that's what we get for having a mullet down. So I want to go really dark and heavy on the hair, just to make it really sort of stand out where the shadow is. So we've got that ear here. Now this is just purely freehand from what I'm seeing. So with the hair, I'm just sort of doing the shapes that I see. Not wanting to be perfect, it's just sort of just to follow the lines. Sort of doing it in sections and a little bit of just the shadow work just to darken it. And I'm going to come quite dark here because what I'm going to do is just take out some lines with the eraser. I honestly don't think hair has to be precise, you know, like with the rest of the face. I think it's about getting the focal points. You've got the eyes, you know, mouth, nose, the jawline. For me, if I've got the sort of landmarks, we can be a bit more freer with the rest of it. So you can see, like, we got the darker pieces where it was, as I said, sort of the landmarks in the hair. But then we also have the sort of little line work coming through and a little bit of shadow. But just following the general shape of the head so we can see where the hair is flowing. See, we've got our little piece there, so that's coming through. You know, and it also breaks up where you've got some of the harsher lines where you can see where I did do the cross hatching and all of that. You know, we want that to sort of disappear. Those thicker lines for the landmarks, and just thinner ones just to get that essence of what we're looking at. Alright, and there we go. That is my little finished self-portrait. I'm just gonna throw a quick background on it, and there we go. A little self-portrait using a mirror and a tablet. It's a bit of a mix of old school and new school. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it and hope you follow along. I always find it's interesting. And yeah, as you can see, there is a little bit of resemblance. I think it's interesting if you look in the eyes because you can see me looking down at the drawing but also looking up. So I think you have got that movement there. There we go. I've been Dan, and this is how I work with doing self-portraits and portraiture in general. Thanks for watching.